Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Bozzelli's TV. I'm Mike Bozzelli, and unfortunately, I'm not with my co-host today, Daniel Sexton, but he's in good company. He's with Holly Feraci of Republic National, who you may remember from episode 2, who spoiled you guys with a fabulous Shiraz. And I told you we're going to try to up the ante in episode 3, and I think Holly has done it. I'm pretty sure. We have Eric Pennies from Nickel and Nickel, 5 and 5, Napa Gawds of Cabernet. If you guys don't know them, you will know them by the end of this episode. They are, like I said, they are gods when it comes to Cabernet Sauvignon. They are single varietal, single vineyard, militant when it comes to this grape. I know Eric reps a bunch of their other lines, but Nickel and Nickel, I think, is the flagship. And we're so excited to be here with Eric, Holly, and of course, my co-host Daniel today. And I really do feel that we have upped the ante. Let me just tell you how special this is. This is what Wine Advocate said about one of Eric's wines, and I want to see if Eric knows which one they were talking about. And I've never seen a more glowing, more lavish praise on a wine than this. But this is what Wine Spectator wrote. Delivers a lovely beam of cassis and cherry puree flavors, laced with subtle juniper, sassafras, and earth notes. Nicely focused, cedar tinged finish, has a streamlined feel. Drink now through 2027. Drink for eternity. Eric, which wine were they talking about?
So are you asking for which single vineyard they're talking about?
Yes.
Or which single vineyard? That description for me would probably be State Ranch out of Yountville.
State Ranch and Holly. Holly, I think before we started this episode, she told me that State Ranch was their flagship or Cabernet, and you guys are going to be tasting that without me today. I'm so jealous. But like these guys, they got into the wine business. I think they first started out in the nursery business, and Eric could correct me. He's going to give the full, thorough origin story. They started in the nursery business, so they know a thing about viticulture. They understand terroir. They have vineyards scattered like only a mile. Or they sometimes only have a mile between vineyards, but they'll get a totally different flavor profile. These guys are Cabernet gods. They're Cabernet scientists. Location is everything in business. These guys are right in the middle of Oakville, or right in the middle of Napa in Oakville. And I should say Robert Mondavi is across from them, not that they're across from Robert Mondavi. So yes, Robert Mondavi is across from Nickel and Nickel. And Opus is up the street from Nickel and Nickel. I don't want to say that Nickel and Nickel is down the street from Opus, but I just want to give you guys some context into the level of wine that we are going to be introduced to today. This is the canon of Cabernet. It's very hard to get in this club, and I think I even read that I don't think, Eric, any of your wines have ever earned less than 92 points. I mean, you guys are like the 92 plus club.
Yes, 92 plus, and with going into the 18 vintage, what we're currently in, they are 92 through 97 plus.
92 through 97 plus. So this was a very long-winded introduction because it's such an amazing episode, guys. Holly somehow did it. I mean, well, she's competing against herself because she spoiled you guys in episode 2. And we got a lot of views on episode 2. We got tremendous feedback too, but she somehow did it today with Nickel and Nickel. So I'm going to end right now this introduction. So that our wonderful guest has the floor now. And just I always ask Eric. My first question is, how'd you get your start in the wine business, and particularly, how did you end up with such a amazing winery like Nickel and Nickel?
So I got into the wine business via the restaurant business. I was a restaurateur for most of my life. I started in the restaurant business cooking when I was 15. and was in it until I was approximately about 34. Various large restaurant companies within New York City. Towards the end of my career, I owned 3 restaurants. I had 2 in Manhattan, 1 in the Hamptons. And when my kids were little, I had to make a conscious decision to whether or not I want to stay in the restaurant business or get out. And I've always had a passion for wine. Whatever restaurant that I either built, opened, managed, I always was head of the wine program. So I've always been around it. I also went to culinary school, hotel and restaurant management school, and I really started learning and appreciating wine probably my sophomore year in college. I went to Johnson & Wales in Providence. And wine career-wise, when I knew I was getting out of the restaurant business, I reached out to a few of my supplier friends and managers that I was close with at my different distributors. And I said, hey, I'm getting out of the business and I'm really interested in getting into wine, and who can help me? And literally 3 weeks later, I had a few offers. And my first job in the business was working at the time. It was called Beringer Blast, which is now Treasury. And they actually created a position for me because I knew a lot of people in Manhattan. So I was the luxury on-premise manager for Beringer Blast for a few years. And then I did a little multi-state regional position with them, and then since then, just incrementally, just went up the ladder, worked for a number of different suppliers, and then also I knew that I was missing, a piece to round out my my professional career, and that was on the distributor side. So I was lucky enough. I was working for Palm Bay in New York. And I was on a business trip with them, and the VP came over to me. We're having some drinks and says, we have this position available at Southern Wine and Spirits in the Lauber division, which is their fine wine division, and we think you'd be great for it. So I took the job, and I was with the Lauber division for about 6 years, and I ran New York for them. And then slowly I worked my way back into the supplier side. And how Farniente came up is I was working for another supplier, and I was on a business trip in New Jersey, and my boss from California was in town, and we were out doing business reviews, and we got back to the hotel, around dinner time, and we're sitting in the downstairs restaurant lobby, or the lobby restaurant, and just discussing business, and 2 tables down from us was the president of Farniente, and he happened to be in town doing interviews for my position. And I never met him before, and I knew the wines very well, but I had never been to the wineries, and so he overheard a conversation, so he chimed in, you guys in the wine business, and one thing led to another, and my boss went upstairs to sleep because he was jet lagged from California, and I said, let me hang out here for a minute and see, see what this guy's about. So I was like, how did you make out? Because I knew a bunch of my friends who were interviewing for the position. They actually, when they put the job on Wine Jobs, I think they had 400 resumes come in, and then he whittled it down to 2 or 3, and he still didn't find the right person. So I was like, it's 11 o'clock at night, and I said, I got to go to bed. I'm tired. Got a line. He goes, just give me a second. Before you leave, would you be interested? And I said, look, I'm really flattered. Love your wines. I'm really happy where I am. You would have to change my life. And he's basically said, give me a number. Here's my number. What I have to lose. And then he called me on Monday morning, and he said, when can you come out to the winery? We're interested. And I flew out a couple days later, and I had the opportunity to meet the original winemaker, Dirk Hampson, the original president, Larry McGuire. My current boss is Bruce Moores, the CEO. And so I did tours of the properties, and then we went to lunch at Mustard's in Napa, and I was met by Beth Nickel. So we're sitting there having lunch with Beth Nickel, and I'm just in awe. And she's the nicest, most genuine person you ever meet in your life, and she's just fantastic. And by the end of the day, I said, where do I sign up? And now it's going on 4 years. And I couldn't be happier. I've represented a lot of portfolios in my career, and nothing quite like Farniente and Nickel. There is just quality across the board. They spare no expense to the best packaging, the best winemakers, whatever it takes. And it's been a blessing.
Well, I love the journey. Amazing. And I always say there are no coincidences. I mean, you started in the restaurant business. Was Nickel and Nickel on any of your wine lists?
It was always a staple. I usually had verticals. I probably no less than 3 or 4 of the single vineyards. Always Farniente Chardonnay. That's my style. It's very Burgundian in style. And then at the time, a lot of these other brands that we introduced were not even in existence or even a thought at that point. So back in my restaurant career, it was pretty much only Farniente and Nickel wines.
Wow, wow. And your restaurants, they sound like they were definitely fine dining, white tablecloth.
Yes,
Yeah,
all of them.
steakhouses, seafood
So
houses, or
I owned a steakhouse in Tribeca called Dillon Prime, and that was 13 years there. And then we brought on some other partners, and the money guy wanted to expand the group, so we did an Italian restaurant in a boutique hotel in Midtown. And then we had a American restaurant, seafood restaurant out in Bridgehampton for a number of years. So it was pretty crazy, and I wish I still had that kind of energy.
uh, yeah. And I think Manhattan Beverage is the big distributor, right, in New
No,
York, right?
Manhattan Beverage or Manhattan Beer. Well, that's a distributor of beer. But the two largest in New York are Southern Wine and Spirits and Empire.
In Empire, exactly. Okay,
Which used to be Fearless, and then the Emerge, and Fearless Drummer. But those are the two big boys, and then behind that, O-Pee-Chee's pretty big, Winebow is big, and then you have about 100 ankle biters.
okay. And we got a little inside baseball on the show because we do appreciate the business of wine. But I think that Eric gave everyone. Forget that MBA guys. He gave everyone an education and how to end up and he earned his stripes. I mean, he paid his dues along the way, and then there was some serendipity too. Sitting one table over from the head of a big winery, didn't hurt. But wow, amazing. Holly, what is your experience with Nickel and Nickel? And plus everyone, we have to thank Holly for setting up this interview today with Eric. But what is your experience with them?
Yeah, so before actually becoming a distributor or working in wine retail, I was just someone who appreciated wine and loved wine, and in particular loved wines from Napa, and that's kind of where I sort of grew up on wines from Napa, if you will. That's what my parents drank, so that's what some of my first introduction to wine was. And when my husband and I got married, we decided that we were going to get married out in Sonoma, and we were told Sonoma versus Napa, it's a little more affordable, and so we got married in Sonoma, but then during that trip, and then for 2 trips, 2 years after the wedding, so we got married in 2007, so in 2008 and 2009, we would go back out to Napa and go visit wineries, but every time we did, one of our first visits was always Farniente and Nickel. They're really close to each other. They're
2.3 miles.
Yeah, so you can do both in the same day, the same afternoon. It's lovely. And so we did that both times and just absolutely loved our experiences at both Farniente and Nickel. Fell in love with the wines. But one of my best experiences, so we were sitting at Nickel, and there's an outdoor area that we were sitting at, and we had done the tour, and we were getting ready to do some tasting, and there was some other, we weren't in the business yet, so it was a group of consumers, and we were sitting there and waiting for the wine educator, if you will, the person who kind of does the tastings with everyone. And one of the other people at the table, we all got talking, where are you from? And there was another gentleman who at the table was also very small world, was from Alexandria, Virginia. And we're like, no way, like you come all the way out to Napa Valley and there's somebody else from Alexandria, Virginia. That's really funny. And he asked the woman who was leading the tasting, he said, "I've heard of this wine called Lightning Strike." He says, "Are we going to taste that today?" And it was one of Nichols wines, and
Collector's item.
yeah, it is a collector item.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and so the woman kind of just said, "Oh no, we're not tasting that today. That's not one of our normal wines." And he said, "Well, if I buy a bottle, then can I share it?" And we're like, "Gosh, that's awfully nice of you." So he bought a bottle of the Lightning Strike, and we got a chance to taste it. And the story of Lightning Strike is the reason why it's called Lightning Strike is Nickel and Nickel, and Eric will talk more about this, but Nickel and Nickel does, and you mentioned it at the beginning, makes single vineyard expressions of Cabernet Sauvignon. And then they also make a very little bit of some Syrah. And so they're in the winery, and there was a bit of, I guess, an accident where they were doing their pump overs and punch downs and things like that, and accidentally blended a little bit of the Syrah into one of the tanks that was holding their Cabernet. And so when it happened, I'm sure this guy, I don't know if he lost his job or what, but I was like, oh, I just put some Syrah in the cab, what do we do? And, this is just, you're not going to waste wine like this, but they can't, sell it as a normal wine either. It's just not what they do. And so they bottled it up, and they called it Lightning Strike because it's only going to happen once. and it is an amazing wine. It was 2004 vintage when this happened. And it was incredible. I mean, we were just like, wow. And we looked at the woman and we said, "How much can we buy?" and she said, "Oh, only one case per person. It's very little, only one case per person." And so all this time, we've enjoyed it periodically. We have one bottle left of like the 6 that we bought. Yeah, so it's like, so I don't know when we're going to get a chance to drink that. That was a pretty incredible experience. And I've been completely hooked. And they have horses, and I'm a horse girl, so they've got horses on the property, and so it was just really beautiful. And then being from the East Coast, you mentioned Johnson. Well, I'm from Rhode Island, and so they have these beautiful old barns on the property. One is one is from New Hampshire.
Right,
Yep, and it's just like you're in the middle of Napa, and you're standing in a barn that's from back home, from back east, And so it was like that's really cool. Yeah. So anyway, I kind of fell in love then.
And one thing that I want everybody to listen here. Like Mike said, we really don't believe in coincidences, and I think it's absolutely insane how you got your start, like the random, how did that happen? You met somebody from Alexandria, and you got to try this amazing wine. We truly don't believe in coincidences, and we think that wine is very interesting, and it clearly brings people together.
Sure.
And we're fortunate enough to be together today to taste some amazing wine. We wish you were with us, Mike, but
we were here too.
I wish I was there too, guys, but I do not want to delay the tasting. So let's move forward, so I can just salivate vicariously. Wherever you want to start, Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, great. So I just want to let everybody know that the mothership is Niente Winery, right? So it originated in 1885. And it was founded by a gentleman named John Benson, and he was a gold miner, and he owned some gold and silver mines during the gold rush era. And he was actually one of the first people to buy vineyard land up in. He's essentially responsible for Oakville, the AVA of Oakville. And so we've been around since 1885, and the winery thrived from 1885 to the onset of Prohibition. And then it closed down like all other wineries, and it went into basically derelict condition. And then 60 years later, in 1979, the property was purchased by Beth and Gil Nickel. And like Mike mentioned earlier, both of their families are nursery owners out of Oklahoma. And they're still in existence today. And their Gil's family's nursery is the second largest wholesale nursery in the United States currently. Yes, they've always been around viticulture. If you've been to Niente and you've seen the grounds, there's actually 13 acres of some indigenous plantings, as well as I think they have the largest plantings of azaleas in North America. And also to this day, Niente has always produced two varietals, Chardonnay and Cabernet. And fortunately, we have both here today. And then we don't call any of our brands second label because they're not. These are all completely standalone projects with different winemakers for each property. So we call these all sister properties. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to dive into the Nickel and Nickel Truchard Chardonnay. And like we were mentioning before, what's really special about the Nickel and Nickel wines is that these are single vineyard, single varietal wines. So there's no blending whatsoever. Let me just pour a little bit of this out here.
And Eric, for our guests, can you describe that gadget you're using? That very
sure.
innovative gadget.
Yeah, so this is a Coravin, and this is amazing technology that came out probably it's going on 10 years now, I think. And this is the second model that came out. So essentially what's great about this is that if you're working for a luxury supplier and you're seeing a couple of accounts and you pop the cork on everything, you're going to waste wine. So this is basically wine preservation. So if you have some special bottles and let's say you're aging Burgundy, Bordeaux in your cellar and you want to see how they're aging, this contraption is great because you can take out an ounce and just see how it's doing. And whatever wine comes out of the bottle gets replaced by argon gas, which is in this stem right over here. So basically, you put the needle and it goes right through the capsule and the cork, and then you tilt it, and then the wine comes out, and anything that comes out gets replaced by argon. So it's like the wine was never touched. So
today is also a tech show, guys. This technology was revolutionary for the wine business, as Eric said, and Holly knows. I think Robert Parker was doing handstands when this came out. I remember it was a medical doctor that invented that too.
It was.
Yeah, which is really cool. Not like he needed the money, but so how's the shard? Okay, how's the shard look? How does it smell, Dan? Wait. I mean Eric. I'm sorry, Dan. Eric. Dan likes beer.
I'm actually glad Mike asked that because I want to point out to everybody, it's well known that I'm more of a beer guy than a wine guy. And so what I think is so amazing about what we're doing is that when I taste wine and I describe what I'm experiencing, I'm not coming from 30 years of experience and stuff. Like I'm really learning as I taste. Good. And so that's what I want to share with everybody out there that might, be afraid to spend more than $15 on a bottle of wine.
This is way more than 15, Dan.
Yeah, that's true. But I really, that's what I want to, represent as part of this project is I want to, my 30-year-old friends that are, just getting off, pounding Bud Light for the past 10 years, like, hey, like, this stuff is out there and you should expose yourself to it because it's great. Yeah. And, yeah.
Agreed. So what makes our winemaking process special is we call what we do house style because there's nobody else in the valley that's producing their white wines like we are. And what makes us different is that when you start talking about California Chardonnay, the average consumer automatically thinks that it has to be oak butter and vanilla. And you have brands out there like Sonoma-Cutrer, Rombauer, and those are amazing brands, and they are excellent at that style. Our wines are on the other side of the spectrum where we're more about minerality and acid than we are about oak butter and vanilla. So these wines, for me, tend to be very clean, very crisp. Because of the winemaking process, you can actually age our white wines for approximately 15 years. These age like Burgundy.
I gotta say, on my first sip, like the thing that immediately comes to mind is how bright and fresh this is.
Yeah.
I like that. That note or tasting note. Bright. You don't hear that a lot, Holly, right?
Yeah.
No, not with Chardonnay, and it is. It absolutely is. Daniel's right.
Awesome. Good one, Dan. I'm glad you're my co-host.
So this comes from the Truchard vineyard, and then everybody's familiar with the Truchard family. So this is a long-term relationship that we've had with the family. This ranch is about 200 acres, and we source off certain blocks that we touch and we farm, and the wine's really spectacular. And we're going to move into our flagship Chardonnay from Niente next. If you don't have any questions about the nickel and nickel, Mike.
No, I don't. I think Dan looks like he's thoroughly enjoying it, so that sums it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of really nice minerality on the end of that too.
Yeah, the minerality, the acid, and also what you're going to find across the line. Number one, I always like the one word that always comes to mind is balance. Right, so there's not any components that overpower another. Between the fruit, the oak, the acid, everything is integrated and balanced across the lines, which I was always really impressed with. And now we're going to move on to our flagship. So, like I was mentioning, we've been now making Chardonnay in the Valley for 40 years. With the 2019 vintage that we just released last week, that is our 40th anniversary wine. So we're very excited about that, and we're doing a huge national campaign. You're going to see a lot of advertising on social media and in print, just talking about our 40th anniversary. And then our 40th anniversary for Cabernet will be when the 2022 releases. What happened?
I said in print.
Oh, there you go. It's in print. There you go.
If you guys can't see it very well, I'll grab the computer at the end so you guys can check it out.
There are no coincidences. There you go.
There you go. So like I was mentioning before, so stylistically, winemaking wise, very similar in winemaking. You see the same amount of French oak, it's 10 months, combination of new and used, both no malolactic fermentation. I think the difference between the nickel and the Niente is nickel and nickel is Carneros, and the Niente comes from our vineyards in Coombsville. What's also really special about the Niente is when Beth and Gil were resurrecting the winery in 1979, they had done extensive travel both in Burgundy and Bordeaux, and they wanted to bring that winemaking style back to the Napa Valley, and they developed some amazing relationships. And the clones that go into the blend, well, not even really a blend, but of the Niente Chardonnay is the Charlemagne clone from Corton Charlemagne. So they brought those clones back and planted them in Coombsville, and it's really a special wine.
It's got beautiful, juicy kind of pineapple on there. It's like got a fuller texture and just kind of richness to it without the heaviness.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason being is that with the lack of malo, it still has some really nice weight and mouthfeel because we do a little bit of leaf stirring on it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely get crisp pineapple.
Mm-hmm. Melon, pineapple, peach. Yeah. And it's got that nice little oily texture. Yeah. It's really a beautiful expression of California Napa Chardonnay. It's beautiful.
Would Carneros be considered, Eric, some of the most expensive land in Napa if you had to categorize it?
The most expensive is Oakville.
Is Oakville. Okay. More than Carneros?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no land available to plant anymore. Everything, there's no more land left. Right now, the average cost for a planted acre of Oakville Cabernet is almost $1 million. An acre.
Wow.
Crazy.
So
because I know
something that moving forward will only serve to make Napa even more prestigious, that there's basically a very high ceiling now to get in.
There is a very high ceiling, and even those wineries that are selling bulk juice right now, bulk juice, and I'll just give you an idea of the difference between something that comes from Oakville, or if you even just go up, to Lake County a little bit. So Oakville, a ton of Oakville Cabernet right now is going for about $10,000 a ton, and then if you just go up to Lake County or even over to Sonoma, it's maybe 4,000, 3,500. So in my opinion, Oakville is some of the best Cabernet you can get in the world.
And Niente and nickel, you guys don't sell any fruit per se. And I guess in the business when you say you don't sell your fruit.
Not really. I mean, just a little bit here and there, but really, we bottle almost everything that we pick.
Wow. Okay.
But but also, with that said, if we have a bumper crop like we did in 18 and 19, which were huge crops where yields were 25-30% higher than normal, we're not going to bottle everything because we're not going to be able to sell it all, or it won't be able to keep up with our normal cycle of sales, So instead of running out of vintage in a year, that will put us out a year and a half to almost 2 years. And we don't want to put ourselves in that position. So at that point, you definitely would go out there on the market and sell some.
Understood. Okay, so now are we gonna segue to the reds?
We're going to segue to the reds next.
I'm enjoying the Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Hey, if Holly wants to keep drinking the Chard, that's fine with me.
Definitely a really good, Wednesday afternoon at, 1:15 wine.
Lucky you.
That's all right, Mike. Next time I come in, we'll get together.
I'm just gonna come to Napa, Eric. That's it.
Oh, please. Let me know. So
I'm
the
gonna
next
sleep.
one we're
No, sorry, please.
So the next one we're moving on to is a brand that we started back in 2007, and this is something called En Route Les Pommiers, Russian River Pinot Noir. Like I was mentioning before, Beth and Gil spent a ton of time in Burgundy and Bordeaux, and loved Pinot Noir. And they certainly were not going to produce a Pinot Noir out of Carneros, even though some people do. They wanted to be as close to Burgundy as possible. So just like they brought back the Charlemagne clone for the Niente Chardonnay, they were in Burgundy, and one of their friends gave them some Pommard clones. And they brought that back to the Russian River. Specifically in the Russian River, our vineyards are in an area called Green Valley. Some of our neighbors are some of the best Pinot producers in California, like Dumal, Costa Brown, William Salem, Mary Edwards, some of the best of the best. So what's really special about Russian River, Green Valley, it's perfect microclimate for growing both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because you have the maritime influences, the fog rolls in at night, cools the grapes down, burns off by noon, right? So you have bright sunshine, and then the grapes get cooled down again. So it's perfect for growing beautiful Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, of which we make en route. Most of the project is Pinot, but we make a few thousand cases of Chardonnay as well. What's really nice about this is that this is not your overly extracted, juicy fruit bombs full of sugar, like a number of California producers out there that I won't mention. But this is just an elegant expression of Russian River Pinot, and this is 100% varietals. He's about a year in new and used French oak. And En Route Les Pommiers, the Les Pommiers stands for, in French, apple orchards. And originally the vineyards were apple orchards that we ripped out and replanted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And so we wanted to pay homage to the original apple orchard, so we put the Les Pommiers on the label. Right now, in its price category, this is the #1 Pinot in the country at this price category. For the last two vintages, we're tasting the 18 vintage. Both the 17 and 18 vintages garnered a 93-point Spectator.
93 points, everyone. Nothing to sneeze at. And look at the color. Wow, I'm seeing Holly's glass. Look at that color. Wow.
Yeah. So it has really nice strawberries, cherries, blackberry. But again, if you take a look at the color, it's not inky black, like some of the other Pinots I've seen out there. This is Burgundy, and it's just really, if you're going to make a Russian River Pinot, you're not going to get much better than this.
Now you can hold this up on some text here. I've got a piece of paper with some text on it, and you can read straight through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a neat trick.
It is,
There
right?
you go.
See, that's how you know. Like,
There
okay,
you
I'm looking at it.
No, that's not a neat trick, Dan. That's a good wine, or that's a good Pinot.
There you go.
I hear that you guys have the largest underground
Caves?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Farniente was purchased by Beth and Gil, the cave was maybe 5,000 square feet. Is now 40,000 square feet. So we have 40,000 square foot cave underneath Farniente, and then underneath Nickel and Nickel, 30,000 square feet.
Wow.
And what's really nice about both is if you go down to the cave, we have a section of the 40,000 square feet dedicated to Dolce, right? So that's where Dolce ages, and then the rest is for Forniente, Chard, and Cab. And then over at Nickel when you're down there, each row of barrels is a vintage of that single vineyard. You know, so it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What do we think
Wow,
about
I'm
Pinot?
so jealous.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
Any tasting notes on the Pinot, Dan?
I get a lot of like you use the word fruit bomb. I get a lot of like that berry almost. Like it's like a light berry like freshness is almost
Yes.
how I would describe it,
Yeah.
but it's not like a dark fruit like juice bomb by any means. It's
Sounds like the perfect strawberry,
yeah. That's actually honestly
like the perfect.
that's
And to use Eric's word, balanced, the most balanced strawberry ever. Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, like black cherry and
Yeah.
some nice spice to it.
Right.
You don't get all that beautiful
Yeah,
acidity.
definitely nice hit of spice in there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it's I would almost like describe it as like beautifully restrained. Like you get all of that, but it's not overwhelming at all.
Awesome.
Yeah.
As expected, nothing less from the best. Thanks to Holly today and Eric.
And
What do we have next, Eric?
I just wanted to mention who our winemaker
Yes.
is for En Route. We were
Absolutely.
very fortunate to get him a few years back. He was actually the winemaker at Duckhorn's Goldeneye before we got him. His name is Mike Curso, and he's been now with us for about 3 years. And he actually makes En Route and Post and Beam, which we're tasting next. He was making Bella Union, but then we just promoted our assistant winemaker, so she's making that now. We actually have 2 women winemakers now for our property. So we have a woman winemaker for Farniente, and she's now in her 17th vintage, so very consistent. And then Holly Babiak is over at Bella Union, and she just got bumped up to head winemaker just a few months ago. So a lot of people love to hear that we're promoting women.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yes, we love to hear about women in wine, and women are
Yeah.
yes, they're killing it. As you know, there's a couple other big wineries too with women winemakers now
Yeah.
who deserve all the praise for their hard work.
100%. Yeah, they're amazing. So we're going to move on to our newest project, and now we're getting into our Cabernets. And this is a project that we've been speaking about for years, because up until the point that we came out with Post and Beam, to get into the portfolio, our lowest price Cabernet, and we'll talk about Bella Union in a moment, was retailing for about $75, and then you jumped up to Nickel, $125, and then the Farniente, Oakville, and etc. So we wanted to come out with something where we can onboard new consumers into the portfolio that previously were not able to afford these wines, and that's where Post and Beam was born. And we make right now currently a Napa Cabernet and Chardonnay. And this wine is 97% Cabernet and 3% Merlot. Everything that's in that bottle is wines that were sourced from our various family-owned vineyards. And we launched this back in fourth quarter 2020 during a pandemic. And we've already sold 10,000 cases going into January. So we're well above that now. But this brand is just on fire. Score-wise, we just received a 91 point from Spectator on this. So this is Post and Beam by Farniente, and it's really just been extremely well received. Most of the markets that I've launched this in are sold out of their initial allocation even before it gets on the floor of the distributor.
Yeah, I think we did that again.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so.
That's awesome. It really is.
That's just a beautiful Napa Cabernet. You're going to be hard pressed to find a Napa Cabernet of this quality at this price point.
Why do you need the 3% Merlot, Eric, if any?
So it basically softens the Cabernet a little bit. And that's why we do that. And then, the next couple wines, with the exception of the nickel are blends. It's still a very, they all have very high percentages of the Cabernet, but I think that when you blend in Bordeaux varieties in there, it definitely softens the Napa Cab. Napa Cab, for me, tends to be big, and I think that at this price point, the consumer may not be educated on wines that are retailing for 125, 150. And I think that if they can experience a Napa Cabernet of this quality, you want to be a little bit softer in style so you don't turn them off, I think. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I mean, this is the idea of this is to be by the glass.
Right.
So you want something that's approachable and a little bit easy, right? You don't need to have food with it. And this is something, you have a full glass of this and you're like, oh, I had some evaporation problems. Can I get another glass?
Yeah,
and that's
right.
kind of what you hope for with by the glass. So you want it to be nice and soft. And I was going to say, too, about the blending, I like to use a dinner plate analogy. So if you think about like a typical dinner plate, you're going to have maybe your protein, maybe a steak, and then like say some mashed potatoes, and you're going to have some vegetables, and you're going to have a little gravy and some salt and pepper, right? So we can think about blending in this way, in that, the Cabernet is, we can liken to the protein. It's the backbone of the items on the plate, and it's sort of the bigger wine. It's like the steak of that dinner plate. And then you can think about the Merlot kind of being like the mashed potatoes. It's kind of like, when you take a bite and you kind of put the vegetable and the meat and the potato all together on the fork, it's what holds it all together. It's so same thing with the blend. It kind of and it also softens anything on that plate too. So and so that's the Merlot. It also offers some aromatics oftentimes. And then we can talk about, say, Petite Verdot being the spice rack. Petite Verdot has got a lot of spice, and so we can think of it as a salt and pepper on the dinner plate. It's just a little added seasoning, and so you may see like 1% of that. 1% goes a long way, and it also maybe deepens the color a little bit, because Petite Verdot on its own is almost like purpley.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then the Cab Franc I often liken as like the gravy. It finesses the wine. It adds like a nice long finish. It'll add some additional tannins. It just creates that finesse that you sometimes want in a blend. And so did I cover the main Bordeaux varietals? I mean, so that's kind of. I mean, you can maybe think of the Malbec as like the vegetables. I don't know. You need.
I have to say, I'm like amazed because that's absolutely the best description I've ever heard for like what blends.
It's a way of likening it to something that people who aren't normally wine people or maybe are getting into wine can understand, right? And then really kind of sink their teeth into. So that's winemakers are artists, and so I also think of like different varietals that you blend with as being a box of crayons or a palette of paint, right? So they're like, what are we going to create? And so they can have fun with that palette of color in terms of their blending. So it's
Good description. I like that.
Awesome. And what did you just pour, Eric?
So I just poured our 2017 Bella Union Rutherford Cab. And like I was mentioning before, this was our newest brand prior to Post and Beam being released. And this was back in 2012 was our first vintage, 2012. So this has been around for a while. And, we had an opportunity to buy a 30-acre ranch up in Rutherford on a road called Bella Oaks Lane. And if you're familiar with that area, Bella Oaks Lane is a famous mining road that leads right to the base of the Mayacamas Mountains. And like I was mentioning before, there are no vineyards available, nowhere to plant any more vines. So when an opportunity like this presents itself, you look at it and you buy it. So we purchased this property and we developed Bella Union. And this is a classic Bordeaux blend. This is about 89% Rutherford Cabernet, and then Holly was mentioning the other Bordeaux varieties, Malbec, Petite Verdot, Cab Franc, Merlot. So traditional Bordeaux blend. And if you talk about Rutherford Cabernets, you always hear the term Rutherford bench fruit, terroir, rustic, dust. you get all those components in this wine.
Graphite?
Not so much
Not so much
graphite.
Not really.
Of it is kind of dusty. The tannins are sort of dusty on the palate.
It's very
Chalky.
Yeah, it's very terroir driven.
Understood.
Really nice tannin.
Yeah. Really, they're structured, right?
Yeah.
They're not but they're not overpowering.
Yeah.
Right, which is great. Score wise, I like talking about scores. This garnered a 95 Wine Enthusiast Best Buy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think this is my favorite
so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Eric just dropped 95 points on you guys today. Don't forget that. Wow.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
this one's going really well for us. Believe it or not, the brand is still building, even though it's been around for 8-9 years. And also across the board, even though we seem like a large winery and we have all these different brands, we're still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. So
Awesome. So I know you're a sought after guest today, or a man in general, Eric. Everybody wants to kiss the hand of the Napa god of Cabernet. So I know we need to keep rolling. What do we have next?
So next we're going to move into our Niente Napa Valley appellation Cabernet. And so up until 2017, Niente was only estate bottled Cabernet. So everything came off from the Martin Stelling vineyard at the winery. And the problem with that is that you can only produce so much off about 80 acres. And we had a lot more demand than supply. And as a growing winery, we had to fix the problem. So the way to fix the problem is to come out with a Napa appellation, which means that you can source fruit anywhere in the Napa Valley. That's what that means. So everything that's in this bottle is sourced from family-owned vineyards. The base of the wine comes from the Martin Stelling vineyard at Niente. And this is also a typical Bordeaux blend as well. And this wine, it basically just keeps on getting better. This is the 2018 vintage, and I think the 2018s, in my opinion, are the best vintage coming out of Napa since probably the 07s and the 13s. That's what I'm comparing them to. This particular
2018 cabs.
The 18 cabs coming out of Napa are stunning because it was a winemaker's dream for the vintage. There weren't any heat spikes. There wasn't a lot of water. The temperature was beautiful. They were allowed. The Cabernet was allowed to hang out there as long as it needed to, come up to the right amount of bricks, and it's just beautiful. Hence, another 95 pointer.
Wow. And give me some tasting notes, Dan. Come on, he just dropped 95 points on you. Give me something more than drinkable.
I really like the tannins on this one. I'm really getting like that in the sides of my mouth. You just said drinkable, and that's all I could think of.
95 point wine, and you say drinkable? Come on, Danny. This is the fun part of the show, everyone. Making Dan feel awkward.
Yeah. So think about just red fruits. Think about all the red fruits. Blackberries, right? Blackberries.
Get
raspberry, plum, right?
Plum. I definitely get plum. Yeah. I actually think I like this better than the previous.
You can't go wrong with either of them.
Yeah. And Valley Union is a lot about structure and some of like those maybe a little bit deeper. It's darker. It's like you get more of those tertiary. Like I get more leather in there, whereas this definitely has some more fruit. So it's more fruit forward.
Yeah. But the thing that actually strikes me about all the wines we've tasted is the balance in all of them.
Yeah. Very, very much so.
Like none of them have overwhelmed my palate in any way. Just very
balanced.
Exactly.
Don't say drinkable when you're hanging out with the Napa god. Stop. Okay, Eric, did you?
Another great thing about the ageability of these reds, you can age these wines for an average of 25 years. Not that we
Wow.
want you to do that. We want you to drink them, but ideally buy a case, drink a couple bottles, and then lay down a couple bottles, right? And go back, every year or so, break another bottle out so you can experience how it's aging in the bottle.
For all you beer guys out there, think of those barrel-aged stouts that you aged. Treat it the same way. Buy a
Awesome.
case, drink one, wait a few years, see how it, ages.
Okay. Do we have one more?
We have one more. So we are going to do one of our single vineyards from Nickel and Nickel. And I chose the Sullinger Vineyard because it's one of my favorite. And the Sullinger Vineyard just happens to be the vineyard in the backyard of Nickel and Nickel. So this is our home vineyard. So Nickel and Nickel Winery, like you were mentioning before, so it's directly across the street from Robert Mondavi, Tokalon Vineyard. And then some of our neighbors are some of the best Cabernet producers in the world, like Screaming Eagle, Harlan, Groth, Turnbull, and Opus. And we all are right there in Oakville. It's hallowed ground. It's, in my opinion, it's where some of the best Cabernet comes from in the world. Absolutely. But the Sullinger Vineyard is a 30-acre ranch planted to 100% Cabernet, and it's named after the original proprietor of the land, John Sullinger. And the property is just gorgeous. We have a few, Holly was mentioning about our barn there, and that's kind of where Post and Beam came from, because it's a barn that we acquired and dismantled from 1770 in New Hampshire. We brought it piece by piece and rebuilt the barn on the Nickel and Nickel property. It's really a special place. And what's really great about these wines is that they're ready to drink upon release. Some of the other neighbors that I mentioned, they're beautiful wines, but they're they need bottle age to have everything get integrated. But these are drinkable right out of the gate. Yes, you can age this 25 years. But it's just juicy, jammy, balanced, and just you can drink this. I mean, I need a steak with this. This is just a great steak wine. But our Cabernet project at Nickel and Nickel, we have 20 single vineyard Cabernets that are from sub-appellations within Napa Valley, and in some cases, yes, they're 2 or 3 miles from each other. In other cases, a couple hundred yards. But to really be able to tell the story of our single vineyard program and why we make so many is you have to have the wine and then look at the soil that comes from that vineyard, and that really tells the story. So usually what I do every year is I go around to my major markets and I bring a sampling of 10, right? And then I'll bring the soil from each one of those vineyards and line them up. And, it's kind of like Baskin Robbins. Everybody has a favorite, right? Do we need to make 20? Well, I mean, why not? If we can, why not? But there are a number of, more popular ones. Sullinger is probably in the top 3, and State Ranch, Quicksilver, etc. But all the wines are really just beautiful expressions of single. Your typical Bordeaux blends as well. And there's, I don't know another winery that's doing a single vineyard program like Nickel and Nickel. And our first vintage produced was 1997.
And Eric, I don't know if Holly prefaced to you, but I'm shamelessly biased about Italian wines.
Okay.
And I go on these rants, and this is only our 3rd episode, but I go on these rants about how all America wants to do is talk about California cabs. In America, you are not going to be able to top those last few minutes where Eric just talked about California cabs. I mean, thank you, Eric, for that description. And thank you for sharing with us all that goes into these amazing California cabs that come from Oakville. Like you said, hollowed ground. It's in Holly even said today, this is going to be a religious experience today with Nickel and Nickel. And I think you definitely delivered, Eric. And Daniel, I see him. He hasn't put his glass down since this tasting started. So the beer guy is really impressed. I think this was the most epic virtual tasting, everyone. We tasted 7 wines today. Eric dropped probably 2,000 points between all of them. Nothing was under 91 points. I mean, you guys are really spoiled, and we have to thank Holly for that, for setting up this interview with a luminary like Eric in the business that comes from such a distinguished winery like Nickel and Nickel. Thank you so much, Eric, for your time. I know you're very sought after. I know there's a prestigious country club that wants your time right after me, and so I need to respect that. But if you want to close with anything now you may. But like you said, just from us, from everyone at Bozzelli's TV, thank you for your time. This has been amazing.
I'm going to jump in really fast and say, if you're interested in any of these wines,
go to casewinelife.com. But see, I didn't want to sell because it's hard to so I'm a big believer in the soft sell. And they want to talk California cabs. We brought Mr. California cab for them today. And so, yes, go to casewinelife.com. We can help you source any of these wines. Free shipping on all cases, everyone. Because if you're about that Case Wine Life, I mean, you don't just buy 1 or 2 bottles of any of these wines. You're gonna want a case. And as you know, and as thanks to Dan, we always offer 10% off on all cases.
There you go. Well, great. Well, thanks again for having me, and looking forward to doing this again in the future.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Anytime you want to come on, you have open invitation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks, Dan. Hope to see you.
Yep. See you soon.